Hi everyone and welcome to my first bookish themed video. If you already follow me on Instagram then you will have already seen my Wicca and Witchcraft book collection. I've had a few people ask me about which books I would recommend, which books are good for those people getting started. So rather than bombarding you with all the books, I thought I'd break it down into stages. So this video is going to focus on books that are good for beginners. So if you're just getting started on your Wicca or Witchcraft journey, then that's what they'll be useful for. However, if you are also wanting to have a little bit of a refresher of Wicca, Witchcraft, then this will be useful for people wanting a little bit of a recap. I've chosen 4 books from my collection. So they are Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham, a little bit of Wicca by Cassandra Eason, Wicca, A Modern Guide to Witchcraft and Magic by Harmon Nice, and lastly Witchery by Juliet Diaz. So if you want to grab yourself a cup of tea or a beverage of your choice, then we'll make a start. So we're going to start with the book that I started with, which is Cunningham's Wicca, A Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. It was originally published in 1988, so it's a little bit old, it's not exactly up to date, but Cunningham is highly regarded within the Wiccan community, so a lot of people still do use this book. So it's split into 3 sections. There's theory section, practice section, and then there's a book of shadows. So I found the theory section really useful when I first started. He guides you through key tools that you might need, so cauldrons, censers, tells you about the pentacle, and also how to get started on a book of shadows. When beginning a Wiccan or Witchcraft journey, one thing that I recommend is getting to know the wheel of the year, so the festivals, the celebrations, the Sabbats, and that is featured in this book, but Cunningham refers to them as days of power. So he can be quite old-fashioned in some ways when he's describing them. However, he does provide tips on things that you can do during festivals and how to set up your altar. On a personal level, I did find this book quite daunting when I first started, but I did go into it with an open mind. So in the end I found I was picking and choosing which bits I wanted in my practice and which bits worked for me. So I ended up leaving some things out that maybe I wasn't comfortable with, or didn't really suit what I wanted in my practice at the time. And that's one of the great things about Wicca or Witchcraft, is that it is sort of a pick and choose. It's what works for you. It's very flexible in that way. So overall, I do still come back to this book quite a lot for reference, especially the Book of Shadows in the end, just because it's got food recipes, incense recipes, quick reference guides for things like herbs, crystals, runes. So that's the main things about this book, really. So like I said, a lot of people do still use this book, but bear in mind that it is quite old-fashioned. Okay. The second book that we're going to look at is probably the one that's best suited for beginners. So a little bit of Wicca by Cassandra Eason. It is part of a series, so she's done other books along this sort of line, so a little bit of, and then it could be crystals, it could be chakra, it could be mindfulness. She's done all sorts of things in the series. The main thing about this book is that it's just broken down into chunks, and that's what makes it really, really good for beginners, because it's just quite bite-sized. It might be that you are not sure really yet if you want to get into Wicca or Witchcraft, and you just want to dip your toe in a little bit, and I think this book's really useful because it gives you a really good overview, and you can decide really if it's for you or not before you make that commitment. It covers the basics, so setting up an altar, the magical tools that you will need, how to cast a circle, rituals, and the wheel of the year as well. So the book itself is actually described as an easy to understand introduction, and that's basically what it is. I find that I don't really come back to this book as much now that I'm a little bit further on in my practice, that I'm a little bit more developed, and I've grown. in my Wicca and witchcraft journey. So it's definitely for beginners. So if you already have a basic knowledge, then it probably wouldn't be that useful for you. Okay. So the third book that we're going to look at is probably one of my favourites out the books from today. It's Wicca, A Modern Guide to Witchcraft and Magic, and this one's by Harmony Nice. And that's pretty much what it is really. It's very modern, it's very current and up to date, and it's a very contemporary take on Wicca and witchcraft. I wish I had found this book earlier in my practice, as it really captures what Wicca and witchcraft is to me. It's almost an updated version of the Cunningham one, in that it is a lot more contemporary. I discovered this book through YouTube, from Harmony Nice's YouTube channel, and I saw that she had a lot of passion for Wicca, so that was the reason that I wanted to read the book really. So as well as covering what the other books cover in terms of the Wheel of the Year, altars, magical tools, she also looks at the mental health benefits that Wicca and witchcraft can provide. So she looks at meditation, self-care, and even the creative aspect of Wicca and witchcraft, which are all the things that I wanted from my practice really. The one thing that I do think was missing from this book was Harmony herself. Oh, okay. After watching her YouTube videos, I hoped that I'd find a little bit of herself in there. Other than the introduction, she doesn't really tell us much about her personal practice. It is just the basic information of how to get started with Wicca and witchcraft. So it is very much a beginner's guide, but it is a lovely book. And if you can't see it from there, it has got a lovely cover. Bobo, what are you doing? Do you want to sit on the pillow? Come on. Bobo. Go. Okay. Lastly, I want to explore Witchery by Juliet Diaz. It's worth noting a couple of things with this book. Firstly, it's not solely about Wicca. In fact, it focuses more on the witchcraft aspect, so it's not considered a Wiccan book. Although it can be used for Wiccans, because there is a lot of crossover. Secondly, I would describe this as more of a transitional book, so beginners moving on to maybe more intermediate. It has all the beginner bits in it, but it really asks you to consider what you want from your practice, your attitude to witchcraft, what type of witch you want to be, and it does explore more practical areas of the craft. So it does cover the basics, but once you're comfortable with that, it moves on to looking at meditation, grounding, and manifesting. This is a book I still come back to quite frequently. It contains rituals, spells, potions that you can use, and one of my favourite things, which is herbal magic. So Juliet Diaz does have a master, or she is a master of science in herbal medicine, so she does know her stuff. Although it's important to note that there is no herbal medicine in the book, it's just herbal magic. So all alternative therapies should accompany medical advice, they shouldn't really be a replacement. So just bear in mind that this one is leading into more intermediate areas. So overall, what I would say is if you're wanting something that's traditional, looking at the heritage, bit of old school Wicca and witchcraft, then Cunningham is where you need to go. If you want something a little bit more up to date, a more modern take on Wicca and witchcraft, then Harmony Nice would be a good place to start. If you're looking for a more practical guide, if you just want to jump in and start doing some spells and rituals, those sorts of things, then I would recommend Juliet Diaz. And then lastly, if you're wanting very basic, quick, simple format, then Cassandra Eason is the person to go to. I hope you enjoyed the video and you found it useful. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about today, then please do leave a comment. Let me know what you thought of them. Did you find them useful? What did you like about them? What did you dislike about them? If you do have any other recommendations, then please leave those in the comments as well. I love finding new books to try, and I'm sure other people would find it useful as well to have some other recommendations.